I didn't slam doors or throw plates when I discovered my husband's affair. I didn't scream or collapse into tears. The only sign that my world had just imploded was a slight tightening around my eyes as I stared at the text message that wasn't meant for me. Can't wait to see you tonight. Don't worry about her. She suspects nothing. 3 more weeks and we'll be free. My husband James had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. The notification had popped up from someone named Work, Mike, but I knew James didn't have a colleague named Mike. What he did have was a habit of poorly disguising his passwords and contacts. The shower was still running upstairs as I scrolled through weeks of messages between my husband of 8 years and a woman named Michelle. I learned they'd been seeing each other for 7 months. I learned she was 10 years younger than me, worked as his administrative assistant, and believed every lie he'd told her about our loveless marriage. I learned he planned to leave me after our upcoming anniversary dinner, a dinner I had been planning for weeks to celebrate what I thought was a milestone in our relationship. I set the phone down exactly as I'd found it and resumed chopping vegetables for dinner. By the time James came downstairs, hair still damp, I had compartmentalized my rage into a cold, hard knot in my chest. I smiled and asked him about his day while my mind raced, calculating my next move. My name is Rebecca, and at 36, I had just discovered my husband's betrayal in the most mundane way possible. But while James was probably congratulating himself on his perfect deception, I was already 10 steps ahead of him. I was thinking, I said casually as we ate dinner, we should make our anniversary celebration special this year. Maybe invite the family. Your parents have been asking when we'll host again. James looked up from his phone where he'd been surreptitiously texting all evening. Yeah, sure, whatever you want. Whatever I wanted, as if he hadn't already decided our marriage had an expiration date. That night, as James slept beside me, the same man who had once vowed to love me forever now planning his escape, I stared at the ceiling, mentally revisiting our life together. We'd met at a mutual friend's wedding. I was a bridesmaid. He was the charming groomsman who kept refilling my champagne glass and making me laugh. He pursued me with such focus and determination that I mistook his intensity for depth of feeling. Now, I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. I remembered our wedding day, the hopeful faces of our families, the genuine tears in James's eyes as he recited his vows. Had that all been an act too? Or had something shifted along the way? Something I'd missed while I was busy building a life I thought we both wanted? Sleep eluded me that night and many nights after. But with each passing hour of insomnia, my resolve hardened. If James wanted out, I would give him an exit, just not the one he was expecting. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not the family attorney James and I shared, but one recommended by my friend who'd gone through a brutal divorce 2 years earlier. I took the day off work, citing a migraine, and spent 5 hours detailing my marriage, our assets, and the evidence of James's infidelity. Are you sure you want to go this route? The lawyer, Diane, asked me. Most people would confront their spouse immediately. I smiled thinly. I'm not most people, and James isn't expecting this. That's my advantage. Diane leaned back in her chair, studying me with newfound respect. Tell me about your financial situation. Joint accounts? Property? Both our names are on the house, but I made the down payment with an inheritance from my grandmother. We have joint checking and savings, a joint investment portfolio that's done well. James makes about 30% more than I do at his job, but I've been steadily climbing the corporate ladder. I paused, recalling a detail. Oh, and I funded his MBA 3 years ago, took out a second mortgage on the house to do it, a mortgage I've been paying half of while he reaps the career benefits. Diane made notes, nodding. Good, that's very relevant. She looked up. And you're certain about the affair? The texts are clear evidence? I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. This was the first time I'd spoken the truth aloud, and it made the betrayal freshly painful. 7 months with his assistant, and he's planning to leave me after our anniversary dinner in 3 weeks. What an idiot, Diane murmured, almost to herself. Then louder, Rebecca, I need you to do something that goes against every instinct you probably have right now. I need you to pretend everything is normal for these 3 weeks. I'm already doing that, I assured her. He has no idea I know. Excellent. While you maintain that facade, I'll prepare the strongest possible divorce filing. In the meantime, I want you to gather documentation. bank statements, property records, tax returns, anything financial from the last 5 years. As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't expected, a sense of power. James thought he was orchestrating our breakup, but I was taking back control of the narrative. Over the next 3 weeks, I became an actress worthy of an Oscar. I planned our anniversary dinner with apparent excitement, invited both our families, and continued to kiss James goodbye each morning as if nothing had changed. Meanwhile, I systematically secured my future. I moved half our savings to a separate account. I gathered financial records, documenting every asset we owned. I made copies of the text messages, backing them up in multiple locations. I consulted with a realtor about the value of our house. I researched apartments in my price range. And I commissioned the most beautifully lethal divorce papers ever created. Each night, as James worked late, or so he claimed, I made lists of what I wanted from this divorce. Not just material possessions, but dignity, freedom from his lies, the chance to rebuild on my terms. The element of surprise is your greatest weapon, Diane had advised during our second meeting. He thinks he's in control, planning this dramatic exit. When you flip the script, he'll be off balance, more likely to agree to favorable terms. I thought about James's carefully controlled image. He presented himself as the perfect husband, the rising executive, the man who had it all together. How would he react when that facade crumbled in front of everyone who mattered to him? During those 3 weeks, I also reflected on our marriage more deeply. Had there been signs I'd missed? In retrospect, there were subtle shifts. James becoming more critical of me, more secretive with his phone, more distant in bed. Classic signs, I suppose, but hindsight always provides clarity that's impossible in the moment. I remembered a dinner 6 months earlier when James had casually mentioned his new assistant, describing her as surprisingly competent. Now I understood the real meaning behind that assessment. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I'd been blind to. One evening, about a week before our anniversary, James surprised me by coming home with flowers, something he hadn't done in months. "What's this for?" I asked, arranging them in a vase. "Just because," he said, kissing my cheek. "You've seemed happier lately. I wanted to acknowledge that." The irony was almost too much to bear. I was happier because I had purpose now, the purpose of orchestrating my response to his betrayal. But I simply smiled and thanked him for the gesture, wondering if his sudden attentiveness was born of guilt or a desire to throw me off the scent. That night, as we lay in bed, James reached for me in a way he hadn't for months. I nearly refused, the thought of intimacy with him now revolting. But something stopped me. This was part of the performance, I told myself. Just another scene in the play. Afterwards, as he slept, I slipped out of bed and stood by our bedroom window, looking out at the neighborhood we'd chosen together. 3 more houses on this street were occupied by couples who had already divorced. I used to think we were different, special somehow. Now I understood there was nothing unique about our story. The day of our anniversary dinner arrived crisp and clear. I spent the morning at the salon, getting my hair and makeup done, not for James, but for me, for the photographs that would inevitably document this night. "You want something dramatic?" my stylist had asked, noting my request for a bolder look than usual. "Exactly," I'd replied. "Tonight's a turning point. I want to look the part." She'd given me smoky eyes and red lips, styled my normally conservative bob into something more sophisticated. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, which seemed fitting since I barely recognized my life anymore. "You look amazing," my sister whispered when she arrived early to help set up. She was the only person I'd confided in, and even she didn't know the full extent of my plans. "I need to," I replied, smoothing down my carefully chosen red dress. "This is the most important performance of my life." My sister squeezed my hand. "Are you sure about this? Going public is a big move." "He made that choice when he decided to leave me at our anniversary dinner," I said. "I'm just changing the ending to his story." Our dining room looked like something from a magazine spread. Candles, flowers, fine china. I'd spared no expense. This would be a night to remember, just not for the reasons anyone expected. I'd spent hours on the details, selecting wines James's parents loved, preparing his favorite appetizers, creating personalized place cards in elegant calligraphy. The irony of my efforts wasn't lost on me. I was crafting the perfect setting for my husband to humiliate me, or so he thought. The cream-colored envelope containing the divorce papers sat in my handbag, its weight seemingly greater than its actual mass. I had asked Diane to make them especially beautiful. Thick, expensive paper, a red wax seal with our initials intertwined. If this was to be theater, I wanted compelling props. Guests arrived in waves: James's parents, my parents, his brother and wife, my sister and her husband, two couples we'd been friends with since college, 14 people in total, all dressed for a celebration. My mother embraced me tightly. 8 years, she whispered. I'm so proud of the marriage you and James have built. I smiled thinly, wondering how her words would age over the next few hours. James seemed distracted when he arrived home, barely acknowledging all my work. He disappeared upstairs to change, and when he came down, I noticed he looked nervous. His eyes kept darting to the door. Is someone else coming? My mother asked, following his gaze. Just a colleague dropping off some papers, James said smoothly. I mentioned our party, and she insisted it was no trouble. She? Of course. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. My hands trembled slightly as I rearranged appetizers on a serving platter. This was it, the moment everything would change. For weeks I'd been operating on cold calculation, but now emotions threatened to overwhelm me. Anger, betrayal, grief for what I'd thought we had. You okay in here? James's brother Michael appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. I straightened my shoulders. Just last-minute hostess jitters. He helped me carry platters to the dining room, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Michael had always been the more thoughtful of the Wilson brothers, quieter, more genuine. I would miss him after tonight. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later, just as we were taking our seats for dinner. James practically ran to answer it. I watched from the dining room as he ushered in a young woman with chestnut hair and a nervous smile. She was wearing a cocktail dress that seemed slightly too formal for a quick work errand. Everyone, James announced, leading her into the room. This is Michelle, my assistant. She had some urgent documents for me to sign, so I invited her to join us for a few minutes. My mother-in-law raised an eyebrow but smiled politely. My own mother shot me a confused look. I simply nodded and gestured to an empty chair we kept against the wall for large gatherings. Please, join us, I said, my voice calm and collected. There's plenty of food. Michelle looked uncomfortable but sat down. James positioned himself at the head of the table, suddenly looking more confident. I knew that look. He was about to make a speech. Since everyone is here, he began, raising his glass, I wanted to thank you all for coming to celebrate 8 years of marriage with Rebecca and me. Murmurs of congratulations rippled around the table. I took a sip of my wine and waited. Life takes us on unexpected journeys, James continued. Sometimes we find happiness where we least expect it. I saw my sister's face tighten as she realized what was happening. My mother-in-law's smile froze on her face. The truth is, James said, setting down his glass and reaching into his pocket, Rebecca and I have grown apart over the years. We want different things, and I've found someone who wants the same future I do. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway as James walked around the table to where Michelle sat, her face a mixture of embarrassment and anticipation. Michelle, he said, dropping to one knee and pulling out a small velvet box. I know this is unconventional, but I can't wait any longer. Will you marry me? The gasps around the table were audible. My father half rose from his chair before my mother pulled him back down. James's brother muttered a curse. Michelle, to her credit, looked mortified at the spectacle but nodded as James slipped the ring, a ring I'd never seen before, onto her finger. I'm sorry to do this here, James said, turning to address the shocked table while keeping his hand on Michelle's shoulder. But I wanted everyone to understand that this isn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Michelle and I have been planning our future together. Rebecca and I have been over for a long time. We just haven't admitted it. He looked at me, perhaps expecting tears or hysteria. Instead, I smiled and reached for my handbag hanging on the back of my chair. Actually, I said, my voice steady, I think your timing is perfect, James. I withdrew an envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed with a red wax stamp, and slid it across the table to him. What's this? He asked, his triumphant expression faltering slightly. Open it, I suggested, taking another sip of wine. James picked up the envelope, breaking the seal with his thumb. As he pulled out the papers inside, his face drained of color. These are divorce papers, he said, his voice hollow. Yes, I agreed, fully prepared and ready for your signature. I had them drawn up 3 weeks ago, right after I found your text to Michelle. Michelle's head snapped toward him. You said she knew. You said this was mutual. I laughed, a genuine laugh that released some of the tension in my chest. Oh, Michelle, there's a lot James hasn't told you. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and addressed our stunned audience. I apologize for the dramatic turn our anniversary dinner has taken. As you can see, James and I have indeed grown apart, largely due to his 7-month affair with his assistant, which I discovered when a text message meant for work Mike appeared on his unlocked phone. James was frantically flipping through the divorce papers. You can't do this. The house, our accounts, are detailed thoroughly in the settlement, I finished for him. You'll find I've been quite fair considering the circumstances, though perhaps not as generous as you were expecting. I turned to Michelle, whose face had flushed deep red. The ring is lovely. I assume it's from Cartier? James always did prefer their work. You should know it was likely purchased with our joint funds. Rebecca, James stood up, desperation in his voice. Can we talk about this privately? Why? I asked, genuinely curious. You didn't feel the need for privacy when you proposed to your girlfriend at our anniversary dinner, in front of our families. My mother-in-law had her face in her hands. My father looked ready to throttle James. I think, I continued, addressing our guests, that James and Michelle would appreciate some time alone to discuss their situation. The rest of us should move to the living room. I've prepared dessert, and I believe we're overdue for some honest conversation. I led our shell-shocked guests out of the dining room, leaving James and Michelle at the table with the divorce papers between them. As we settled in the living room, my sister squeezed my hand. How long have you known? She whispered. 3 weeks, I replied, long enough to secure my future. You're incredible, she said. I would have burned all his clothes on the front lawn. I smiled. That would have been satisfying for a moment. This will be satisfying for years. My mother approached, her face ashen. Rebecca, why didn't you tell us? We could have supported you through this. I needed to handle it my way, I explained gently. And I didn't want anyone to have to pretend around James. This way, everything is out in the open. Behind us, raised voices came from the dining room. I heard Michelle say, You told me she was fine with this. And James's muffled response. My father approached, his face grim. Do you want me to throw him out? I shook my head. No need. This is still my house, at least 70% mine according to the settlement. He'll be leaving on his own shortly. James's father, George, a retired judge who had always treated me like a daughter, sat heavily in an armchair. I don't know what to say, Rebecca. I'm ashamed of my son's behavior. You're not responsible for his choices, I assured him. Helen, my mother-in-law, wiped tears from her eyes. All these years, I thought, I believed you two were happy. How did I miss this? We all missed it, I said. James is very good at compartmentalizing his life. As predicted, 10 minutes later, James stormed into the living room, his face twisted with anger. You've been planning this for weeks? Playing me while you calculated how to take everything? I set down my dessert plate. Not everything, James. Just what's rightfully mine, plus a small premium for the public humiliation you intended to inflict tonight. I smiled. Though I must thank you for giving me such a perfect stage for my response. Michelle appeared in the doorway, her mascara smudged. The engagement ring was no longer on her finger. I'm leaving, she announced to no one in particular. I'm sorry for... This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Few things do, I replied calmly, but life takes us on unexpected journeys, doesn't it? She flinched at having James's words thrown back at her and hurried out. The front door slammed a moment later. James looked around the room, perhaps seeking an ally, but found none. Even his parents avoided his gaze. This isn't over, he said, pointing at the divorce papers he'd left on the dining room table. Actually, it is, I countered. You just don't realize it yet. He left without another word, the door closing with significantly less force than when Michelle had departed. In the silence that followed, my mother-in-law spoke first. Rebecca, I don't know what to say. We had no idea... Of course you didn't, I assured her. James is quite good at compartmentalizing his life. It's one of the things that attracted me to him initially, his ability to focus completely on whatever was in front of him. Or whoever, my sister muttered. The evening wrapped up shortly after. No one had much appetite for dessert or conversation after such a spectacle. As I bid our guests goodbye, each expressed some variation of shock, sympathy, and admiration for my composure. "You'll let us know if you need anything," James's brother asked as he and his wife prepared to leave. "I'm sorry about my idiot brother." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I've got things handled." Once everyone had gone, I returned to the dining room and began clearing the mostly untouched plates. My sister stayed to help, both of us working in comfortable silence until she spoke. "How are you really feeling?" she asked, loading the dishwasher. I paused, a half-empty wine glass in my hand. Relieved, angry, vindicated. I took a sip from the glass. No sense wasting good wine. "But mostly, I feel free." She nodded, understanding. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "I rebuild. On my terms?" When my sister left, I found myself alone in the house that had been my home for 6 years. I walked through each room, touching furniture we'd selected together, looking at photos from happier times. Despite my composure throughout the evening, tears finally came, not for the loss of James, but for the loss of the future I had imagined. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and methodically began removing James's things from our closet, packing them into suitcases he'd left behind. This would be his room no longer. I'd already arranged to have the locks changed first thing tomorrow. As I worked, I found a photo tucked inside one of his jackets, a selfie of him and Michelle at some beach resort, both sunburned and smiling. I checked the date stamp. 5 months ago, when James had told me he was at a business conference in Florida. Another lie and a foundation built on deception. I slept in the guest room that night, unwilling to lie in the bed we'd shared. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, as if my body recognized that the worst was over. James returned the next day while I was at work, presumably to collect some clothing. He'd taken his laptop, passport, and a few personal items the night before. I knew because I'd activated the security systems app on my phone, watching silently as he moved through our house like a thief. When I got home, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to be nasty." I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. It was already nasty. He'd just been the only one to know it until yesterday. My phone buzzed with texts from James throughout the evening. "This isn't fair. You ambushed me. We could have worked this out privately. Michelle broke up with me." I responded to none of them. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and called Diane, my lawyer. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than expected," I replied. "James is texting, says he wants to talk." "Don't," she advised firmly. "Not without me present. Men like him get desperate when their plans collapse. He'll try to manipulate you, make you feel sorry for him." I laughed softly. I'm immune to that now. But James was persistent. He showed up at my office the next day, causing a scene in the lobby until security escorted him out. He called my parents, who promptly hung up on him. He even reached out to mutual friends, spinning a tale of misunderstanding and impulsivity. He says he made a mistake, our friend Mark told me over coffee, that he got caught up in something that wasn't real. "The only mistake he made," I replied evenly, "was underestimating me." In the days that followed, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. My boss noticed the change. "Whatever's lit a fire under you, keep it burning," she said after I presented a marketing strategy that won over a difficult client. "I haven't seen this kind of drive from you before." "Let's just say I've recently eliminated some distractions from my life," I replied. 3 days after the dinner, James's mother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Rebecca," she began, her voice strained. "I don't know what to say except I'm deeply sorry about James's behavior." "Thank you, Helen," I said, "but you're not responsible for your son's actions." "No, but I raised him. And somewhere along the way, I failed to instill the values I thought he had." She paused. "He's staying with us. Keep saying you overreacted, that this whole divorce is just you being vindictive." I remained silent, waiting. "I told him he's lucky you didn't set all of his clothes on fire," she continued, and I could hear the hint of a smile in her voice. "George, his father, won't even speak to him." "I appreciate your support," I said, meaning it. "I never wanted to put you and George in this position." "You didn't," she assured me. "James did that all on his own." After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house, reflecting on how quickly life can change. 3 weeks ago, I had been planning an anniversary celebration for a marriage I thought was solid. Now I was negotiating its dissolution with clinical precision. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. James initially tried to contest the settlement, claiming I had tricked him into revealing his affair at a family event to prejudice everyone against him. Your client revealed his own affair, Diane pointed out during our first mediation session. By proposing to his mistress at a family dinner, Mrs. Wilson merely came prepared with an appropriate response. James's lawyer, a college friend who seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the case, shifted in his seat. My client was admittedly misguided in his approach, but feels the proposed settlement disproportionately favors Mrs. Wilson. Diane smiled thinly. The settlement reflects the 8-year marriage, Mrs. Wilson's contributions to their joint assets, and yes, a consideration for Mr. Wilson's infidelity and the public manner in which he chose to end the marriage. I believe any judge would find it more than fair. James leaned forward. I'm not signing this, Rebecca. You're trying to punish me. I met his gaze steadily. No, James, I'm protecting myself from a man who was willing to drain our accounts and abandon our marriage with no warning. The fact that your girlfriend left you after discovering you lied to her as well isn't my concern. His face flushed. Michelle just needs time. She was overwhelmed by the situation. The situation you created, I reminded him. The mediation ended without resolution, but I wasn't worried. Time was on my side. During the weeks that followed, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been lost in the rhythm of marriage. I took a pottery class I'd always been interested in. I reconnected with college friends James had never particularly liked. I started running again, feeling stronger with each mile. Work became a sanctuary rather than an obligation. I volunteered for projects, stayed late to perfect presentations, earned recognition that had eluded me while I was focused on maintaining our home life. You're different, my boss observed during my performance review. More confident, more ambitious. I'm no longer compromising, I explained, in any aspect of my life. She nodded approvingly. It suits you. 2 weeks later, James's lawyer called Diane to schedule another meeting. This time, James arrived looking deflated. The confident, almost arrogant man I'd married was nowhere to be seen. I'll sign, he said before anyone else could speak, but I want it noted that I'm doing this under duress. Diane raised an eyebrow. What duress would that be, Mr. Wilson? He glared at me. My parents have given me 30 days to find my own place. My company has put me on probation pending an HR investigation into my relationship with a subordinate. And Michelle, he stopped, swallowing hard, is dating someone else, I guessed. The look he gave me confirmed it. Michelle had indeed moved on quickly. As I said, James continued stiffly, I'll sign, but I want my objections noted. Duly noted, Diane replied, sliding the papers toward him. As I watched him sign away our marriage, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. 8 years reduced to a signature on legal documents. Yet with each page he initialed, I felt lighter. When it was done, James stood up abruptly. I hope you're satisfied. I'm not satisfied, James, I said honestly. I would have preferred a husband who honored his vows, but I'll settle for a clean break and the knowledge that I handled this with dignity. He left without another word. As the door closed behind him, Diane turned to me with an approving nod. For what it's worth, she said, in 15 years of practicing family law, I've never seen someone handle such a betrayal with more grace and strategic thinking. I smiled. I refused to let his poor choices dictate my behavior. That evening, alone in my house for the first time as a soon-to-be divorced woman, I opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. I toasted my reflection in the mirror, a woman I was just getting to know again. 6 months after the infamous dinner, life had settled into a new normal. I had kept the house, but decided to sell it anyway. Too many memories, both good and bad, lived within those walls. I purchased a sleek condominium closer to my office and threw myself into work, earning a promotion that had long been overdue. Through mutual friends, I heard James had moved to another state for a fresh start. Michelle supposedly was engaged to a doctor she'd met on a dating app. Their drama felt like a story I'd read long ago. Interesting, but no longer relevant to my life. My mother-in-law, former mother-in-law, still called occasionally. "We miss you," she said during one such call. "You were the best thing that ever happened to our son, and he was too foolish to see it." "Life goes on," I told her. "Sometimes in directions we never expected." She sighed. "James called last week, asked if we talked to you about the house. He still thinks you got too much in the settlement." I laughed softly. "Tell him he's welcome to discuss that with Diane." "Oh, I told him to grow up and accept the consequences of his actions," Helen replied. "George and I raised him better than this." In quiet moments, I sometimes wondered what might have happened if I'd confronted James immediately after discovering his texts. Would he have begged forgiveness, tried to salvage our marriage, or would he have simply accelerated his timeline, leaving me unprepared and vulnerable? I didn't regret my approach. The calculated response had given me control in a situation where I could easily have been the victim. It had shown James, and everyone else, that I wouldn't be dismissed or diminished. 1 year to the day after that fateful anniversary dinner, I hosted a small gathering at my new place. My sister, her husband, and a few close friends came to celebrate what I called my Independence Day. "A toast," my sister announced, raising her glass, "to the woman who turned lemons not just into lemonade, but into a gourmet beverage empire." Everyone laughed, glasses clinking. "But seriously," she continued, "to Rebecca, who showed us all how to face betrayal with grace, dignity, and just the right amount of calculated revenge." I smiled, remembering the look on James's face when I slid those divorce papers across the table. It hadn't been about revenge, not really. It had been about reclaiming my narrative, refusing to be cast as the victim in someone else's love story. "To new beginnings," I replied, raising my own glass. Later that evening, as my guests were leaving, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it. I heard it's been a year. I've been doing a lot of thinking. We should talk. James. Always believing he deserved another chance, another conversation, another opportunity to explain. I deleted the message without responding and turned back to my friends. My story wasn't defined by how James had tried to end our marriage, but by how I had refused to let his betrayal break me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't serving divorce papers at a dramatic moment, though I'll admit that was satisfying. The best revenge is living well on your own terms without looking back. As I closed the door behind my last guest and surveyed my new home, filled with light, art, and possibilities, I felt nothing but gratitude for the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal. James had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that public proposal. Instead, he'd merely set the stage for me to begin a far better one where I was both the author and the hero of my own life.